Hello, 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 and welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. You are also being graced with the presence of BC Sanders tonight as co-host on Night Shift. Hey, BC, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great. I'm
You
full
sure
of
about
words.
that?
Yeah, I'm full of
Okay, all
words.
righty, all righty. All right, well, hey guys, welcome back. Happy Tuesday. Let's see here. Let me get in these chats a little bit. For those of you who might be new listeners, Night Shift is a YouTube live show every Tuesday on the Andre Up Late YouTube channel at 8, 7 Central. But then it drops on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you listen to your podcast. It drops to stream there usually the next day. So if you guys have any questions, you can follow me on the Andrea Up Late page on Instagram, and we can talk about the cases and talk about all the things. Man, this computer's just all over the place today. So Night Shift is a true crime podcast. So just know that when you're listening, take heed of that, and we can get started. So what say you, BC? How's your week been?
That's great. I knocked out virtual gang class earlier today.
Okay.
Just doing Chicago gangs and using this same format as StreamYard. People sign up and teach them the classes. They can watch videos, PowerPoint pictures, go over hand signs, rank structure, all of that. So very, very busy.
Very good. So are you tired of talking yet?
No, hell no. I talk all day. I'm actually trying not to talk, so you can go ahead and.
No, I'm good. No, you know what? Actually, I had a list. So if you guys don't remember, we try to talk about a little bit of pop culture from the year that whatever case we're breaking down that evening occurred. So, for instance, tonight, the case we're talking about occurred in 2010. So I wrote down some things, and I must have left them maybe at work or somewhere. I don't know, dropped them in my purse, something like that. But I think I can remember a couple of things.
Okay.
In 2010, Despicable Me came out.
Okay.
The movie Despicable Me.
I did not have that one. Okay.
Okay. Did you ever see that movie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, the Twilight Saga Eclipse came out.
Okay.
Were you Team Edward or Team Jacob?
I have no idea. I've never seen
Vampire
Twilight.
or werewolf?
Oh, I would probably pull for a werewolf over a vampire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we have actually Jacob. I forget his name. You guys, Jesse Metcalf. Is that right? I don't know. Has a podcast now. I don't know. Fun
Who
fact.
that is?
Trivia.
Is
he
one
was
of
the
actors?
werewolf in when I just asked you vampire or werewolf.
Oh, Shark Boy from Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we have C2 said that was your favorite movie.
You're
We
right.
have what was it? Justin Bieber's Baby came out in 2010.
Oh.
Baby,
Okay.
baby, baby.
No, don't sing it. Don't sing it. I don't want to sing it the rest of the night.
Baby, baby. Then do you want to sing Animal by Maroon 5? Because that also came out. And we talked last week. You mentioned that you wanted a hit from Maroon 5 every
I'm
year
pretty
that we
sure
cover.
I said I don't like Maroon 5. I was trying not to hurt anybody's feelings, but they're absolutely not good. Let's not talk about Maroon
I think
5.
those are the ones I can remember. Oh, Kate Middleton and Prince William got engaged in 2010. I don't care about any of the things that I'm saying to you right now.
Guess who else got married?
In 2010?
Yes.
Can you give me a hint?
Okay, I'll just give you a hint. It has something to do with the TV show The Office.
Yes, I have this written down. John Krasinski and Emily Blunt got married in 2010.
Yeah. And that matters because I have never seen The Office until recently, and we've watched, I don't know, 7 seasons now, pretty much, and so I'm getting caught up.
It doesn't get old. For those of you that watch it, you
great.
know, like I think I've seen it 700 times, but it does not get old. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
What else you got for 2010? James Russell said that both of his children graduated high school in 2012.
Okay. I was trying to do the math and how old that would make him, but I'm not good.
It could be all over the place.
I'm not good at math. That's true too. You're right. Kings of Leon had a song that year. You Somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Never mind. Didn't we just watch a reel where a guy was singing that or not?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Kings of Leon were huge for a while.
Oh,
there.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we got C2 in the chats, and he actually loves Kings of Leon.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I have no idea.
James Russell corrected to 2010. Again, if you guys are new to listening to Night Shift, it is a YouTube. If you're listening to it just as a podcast, it is also a YouTube channel. So you can always hop on YouTube and hop in the chats and chit chat with us. And so sometimes you'll hear us engage with our friends in the chat. So come be a friend in the chat.
And it's free. Did you say it was free?
It's free.
It's
also free to hit the like button or the subscribe button.
Yeah. We'll wait until y'all do that and then we'll start back. The like button.
What? Oh,
they gotta hit the like button.
We just get quiet.
Yeah. I got another one.
Okay, I'm waiting for you.
Katy Perry and Snoop Dogg had a song called California Girls. Was that right? Or California Girl?
Yeah.
I didn't know Snoop Dogg was on that.
No.
No. I'm just that's a weird combo. I don't know. I'm not a big Katy Perry fan. Alicia Keys, I think, had quite a few songs out that year.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like Alicia Keys.
The Walking Dead premiered.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did like Walking Dead.
Yes, the first.
At the beginning.
Yeah, first season or two. The first season was amazing. Second season was pretty good, and I couldn't tell you much after that. The Other Guys, the comedy.
Yes.
With Will Ferrell and the other guy, what's his name?
The other guy.
Mark Wahlberg.
Yes.
Whose older brother was in New Kids on the Block.
Donnie, Danny, Jordan, John, Joe.
Yes. Fun fact, you were wearing a New Kids on the Block t-shirt yesterday.
I was. I'll wear it again. I'll wear it on the show.
Hey.
I'll put my Jordan Knight poster up behind me.
Yeah, as you should. The A-Team was remade into a movie that year, too.
That's not a good idea.
I'll let everybody else talk about that. Instagram launched. Right? Instagram launched.
Maybe, yes. But also, I think Facebook hit 500 million users or something. Mm-hmm. And then that movie came out about Zuckerberg.
Okay.
About the origination of Facebook and how he in college, the development of it and how it came about. And so that's kind of when I think his name kind of rose in popularity because people knew Facebook at that point, but didn't know a lot about
him.
And then now it's a verb called being Zuckerberg.
Or whatever it is. Yeah. The iPad was released.
Yes.
That's a bit of technology.
And ADD rates skyrocketed.
What's that?
I said it. That's a joke. I have it, so I can say it. I said ADD rates skyrocketed. I was saying with the advent of the iPad.
I agree 100%. In the short attention span we've developed. Also, in the book realm, Hunger Games, Mockingjay. Sorry, stretch them on. Mockingjay. I guess is book 3.
Oh, Mockingjay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Was released. There are a bunch of other books, but yeah, that's what I got.
All right. You ready to dive in?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll talk about
new
events and chit chat at the end. Hey, Faulkner. Hey, Bosco. Hey, Teresa. Had some really sweet things to say. Carly, Davey, David, C2. If I've missed somebody, it's just because I can't scroll up right now. So, but thank you for being here, and we are excited to get started. Guys, so I am covering, this will be season 2, episode 19, I think, tonight. So the 19th episode on the second season. This is a case that I have covered once before. Sometimes I'll go back over a case that we've talked about, particularly if there have been any new developments or anything like that. Sadly, there have not been new developments on this case, nor do I really think that there will be at this point. But that's not to be discouraged. It's just to get this child's name out there and for her family to hopefully get justice somehow, someday. But I definitely don't want this one to get lost in the weeds. It was not this case locally where it took place made big headlines. They were calling it the Natalie Holloway. If you remember, that's who went missing in Aruba. They were calling it the Natalie Holloway case of Baltimore back in 2010 when this happened. So but nationally speaking, it didn't really cause big waves. So we're going to do that. Let's talk about it, okay? So we're going to be talking about Phylicia Simone Barnes tonight. Phylicia Barnes was born on January 12th of 1994. She spent most of her childhood growing up in Monroe, North Carolina, kind of a small town in North Carolina. Do you know where Monroe is?
I want to say the western part.
I believe so. Yeah. Phyllis was she was a really bright child. She was known for her high academia. She actually skipped third grade straight into fourth grade when she was in elementary school. She attended Monroe Middle School, and eventually she was accepted, excitedly so. She had wanted this acceptance into the Union Academy for her seventh grade year. Moving on, she went into high school. She was a straight A student. Excuse me. She was scheduled to graduate with these straight A's, and she was actually scheduled to graduate high school a year early. So she was just skipping on through school. She would have been very young graduate. I think she was going to be like 16, turning 17, graduating high school. So very young and very, very bright. Her plan was to continue her education at Towson State University, and that was in Baltimore. But keep in mind, she's down in Monroe, North Carolina, and she wanted to study I think it was psychology. Yeah, she wanted to study psychology and early childhood education. So she took part in college prep classes when she was in high school. She was involved in theater. She had a ton of friends. She's a very typical teenager, but again, who is excelling in the academics department. So growing up in Monroe, North Carolina, she actually lived there with her mother. She eventually had some other siblings with her mother there. Her mom had remarried, but her biological parents, were divorced. Now, approaching 2010, Phylicia had not actually had communication with her biological father in about 8 years. So when her parents split, he kind of moved out of the area a bit and he just did not stay in contact with her at all. At first, I think her mom was okay with this, but then as time went on, she's quoted in some interviews saying things such as, as Phylicia got older, she didn't, want her to seek a fatherly figure in a man. And she, even though she had remarried, she didn't want her to kind of seek out what she, any wondering she had of her own father, these kinds of things. So she thought it would be very important that Phylicia did pursue the idea of trying to track down her father or get into some kind of regular communication with him. Now, Phylicia had 3 half siblings that lived in Baltimore. Remember, we just said that she wanted to go to school eventually, to college in Baltimore. Her half siblings were named Brian, Dina, and Kelly. They were up in Baltimore. Now, they were significantly older than Phylicia. She was 16 at this time. They were in their mid-20s. So he had these children prior to having her and then kind of split, but they were still a bit in communication with their dad. So at Phylicia's mother's encouragement, she tracked down her half siblings in the hopes that that would further her efforts to have communication with her dad. Okay, so she did. She was able to find them on Facebook. We're just talking about Facebook. She's able to find them on Facebook, and Kelly, one of her half sisters, will say that they hit it off immediately, that they felt like they had never not had contact. They felt like sisters right off the rip, and they just really hit it off well, all of them. So because of this, Phylicia started, she had only known them for really 2 years, like I said, but she did begin to start to visit them some. Communication was more consistent with them, and they really were getting to know each other pretty quickly. So come this December of 2010, Phylicia wanted to go visit her half siblings up in Baltimore around her Christmas break time from school. So she begged her mom. Her mom had let her go up there before, but just, I don't think she had ever quite been up there for like a full week like this. And that's what this time would be. And so after a lot of urging and begging, like I said, she was a good girl. Her mom did trust her judgment, and she eventually relented and let her go for longer than her, like 2 or 3 days. So she was going to go up there for the week that she was out of school for Christmas break. Excuse me. So that's exactly what she did. So While she's up there, she decided to stay with Dina, her half sister Dina. Now, in Dina's apartment, she also lived with a guy named Michael Johnson. Now, Michael and Dina had been together for about 10 years. So prior to Phylicia going up there this December of 2010, she had actually been up there the year prior and met Michael when she was hanging out with Dina. And they had exchanged like some silly banter and things like that. They would even exchange some text communication. Michael would refer to Phylicia as like little sis, things like this. So they all kind of had somewhat of like a sibling relationship with Phylicia. So when she goes up there this December of 2010, it was not her first time to be around him, to meet him, and to hang out with her. I'm so sorry. Is there an update on this case? Unfortunately, I don't believe that there is right now. We have someone in the chat asking a question about the case. Give it a listen. If you have any new information to give us, though, please do. We'll welcome any new information you might have. So Phylicia goes up there in December 2010, and she's hanging out with Dina. Now, Dina was a pharmacy tech worker at a local pharmacy there near the apartment she lived in. And she had a pretty full schedule with work. But while Phylicia was up there, she would a lot of times spend her days either kind of going to work with Kelly or with Dina, and the rest of the time just really enjoying her time out of school, and hanging out, just a normal break from school. So I'm going to tell you what happened on the morning in question, the day in question, and then we're going to take it back a little bit to discuss some of the inner workings of these relationships and what things were kind of like while Phylicia stayed there at the apartment with Dina. So on the morning of December 28th, 2010, at approximately 8:45 in the morning, we're just going to go through a little bit of a timeline that's not terribly complicated at this point. Dina kind of put her head around the corner to see that Phylicia was sleeping. So Dina was going to be leaving for work at that time. She didn't wake her, and she went on to work. So at around 9 o'clock that morning, Michael came to the apartment to pick up his brother. So Michael had a teenage brother who was kind of in and out of the apartment at this time as well. So Michael comes to the apartment at 9 that morning to pick up his brother. And this is all per Michael's account, and to take him to a different relative's home. He returned back to the apartment around 10 o'clock in the morning. So he came inside, he was doing some laundry, and he began to move some of his things out. So we learn that at this point, Dina and Michael had actually kind of broken things off. Some sources state that they had things were broken off for almost a year, but that he was still kind of in and out of the apartment. It almost points to maybe they kind of had still a friendly situation going on, maybe. But some events had happened in the past few days that really kind of put the kibosh on everything, and they were finally going to call it splits. So this day, on December 28th, Michael comes back to the apartment, and he starts, like I said, to do some laundry per his account and to start moving some of his things out of this apartment. We do learn later that Dina didn't seem to realize that this would be the day that he was going to be moving his things out.
Okay.
That they'd had the discussion, evidently, that they were done, but she didn't necessarily know he was moving out that day. So around this time, Phylicia woke. She began to text Dina and her other half-sister, Kelly. So she's just kind of laying on the couch, guys. Typical teenager, just kind of playing on her phone, texting her sisters. And she asked Kelly, her other sister, to pick her up after her work shift. So she was like, come pick me up. Let's hang out. They often did that. Around 11 o'clock that morning, Michael texted Dina asking to get back together. So per his account, he's doing laundry, moving his stuff out. But I guess he's fickle in this thought, because then he texts Dina to say, can we get back together? Which she was not down for that. So at 11:08 that morning, Phylicia texted Kelly again to ask her to leave work early and hang out with her. This sounds like very typical to me, like teenage, just kind of whining, like, leave work, come hang out with me. Come on, let's hang. Like, you don't need to be there. Let's go. So at 11:09, Phylicia called Dina. So she's just calling each sister kind of back and forth right now and texting with them, and said that she was home. She was just hanging out with Michael and nobody else was there. Dina told Phylicia to look at Facebook and see pictures of Michael's new girlfriend, end quote. So Dina's irritated. Evidently, there were some pics circulating around social media of Michael and another girl. So Phylicia made 2 Facebook posts around this time. We have those timestamps. One stated that she was hanging out at her sister's house with her sister's ex, and another stated that she was hungry. So if you guys, can you remember, things change so rapidly. We talk about this often on Night Shift, but so this was 2010. That's 14 years ago now. The way we use social media now is so different than we did 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you don't have Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
but Facebook in a different form, I know you're familiar with it, though, in a different form than Instagram, will have your profile picture and it'll have your name. And if you guys remember, because it feels weird to read it now or see it now, Facebook Memories will show you, your old posts, like so on this day 10 years ago, 12 years ago, etc. And it would say your name, and we almost all used it as like, it was like you were talking in first person.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it would say like Andrea, and I might have typed something like, is tired today, woo, like stuff like that. Like we don't really write like that anymore, but that kind of stands to reason here when we talk about Phylicia's Facebook post that day, where she had said that she was like, one of her posts just stated that she was hungry. So that makes sense, for then just like kind of some silly posts like that. So she then called Dina at 11:38 that morning and talked about booking a hair appointment sometime soon. So this was their banter. This is per Dina's account to law enforcement later. At 12:23 that afternoon, Phylicia sent what would be her last text to Dina, and evidently it was in the form of a Facebook post. So we have Kelly calling Phylicia now. So remember, Phylicia had wanted Kelly to leave work early. Kelly lived at a different residence and come pick her up to hang out, maybe go get their hair done. So Kelly calls Phylicia multiple times between 12:30 and 1:30 that day. It kept going straight to voicemail. So they had agreed that Kelly would pick Phylicia up between 1:30 and 1:45 p.m. Well, she thought that plans must have changed. She actually thought that Phylicia might just still be asleep or had fallen asleep or taken a nap. So she decided to just stop trying to call, and she wasn't going to pick her up. She was just going to go on back home or do something else and let it be. She figured she'd hear from her soon enough. So at 1:04 p.m., and keep this time in mind, we're going to come back around to this, but at 1:04, Dina called Michael. He responded via text. He did not pick up the phone, so he responded via text to say he was looking for a charger for his phone because his phone was about to die. He stated that Phylicia was asleep on the couch, and it looked like her phone had been blowing up. It looked like her phone had been ringing. This is what he's telling Dina. So Michael reportedly left the apartment, per Michael's account of this evening. Michael left the apartment at 1:30 p.m. You can type that. Yes, there it is. And stated that she was still sleeping, but that she woke when he left, saying that she was going to get something to eat. So he's about to leave the apartment, he says, at 1:30. Phylicia's waking up, and she's saying, I'm going to go get something to eat. Now, where this doesn't necessarily make sense is in the vein of the context that her sisters and her mother will say she was not city savvy. She was not a big city girl. Excuse me. In fact, when she would go to Baltimore these few times, she, generally speaking, they would say would not leave the apartment without one of her sisters. So it wouldn't necessarily be like Phylicia to say, I'm going to go grab some food and just bop out on foot to get food. That's something that they have pointed out since, when Michael has stated that that's what she told him. And it could be something, not to get in the weeds of that she in her head thought, well, when Kelly comes, I'm going to go get something to eat. Mm-hmm. But just keep that in mind because there are some differing theories on what might have happened as soon as they can't find her. So at 3:08 p.m., Kelly contacted Dina, and she was concerned because it's now been a couple hours. She still can't get in touch with Phylicia, and Felicia's not texting or calling her back or answering her calls. So at 3:08, Kelly calls Dina. Dina says that Phylicia just may still be asleep on the couch. So around this time, the little brother, Michael's little brother, remember, he had been kind of staying there. He returns to the apartment a little after 3 p.m. Okay. You guys stick with me. We're almost done with this part. Between 4:50 and 5:10 p.m. So now we've gotten into the whole day, pretty much the whole work day is kind of come and gone. Michael is now returning back to the apartment. So he said he left around 1:30 that afternoon. between 4:50 and 5:10, he comes back to the apartment. He says that the door was unlocked, that music was all the way up. It's unclear whether he entered the apartment or whether his brother came out at this point. So Dina leaves work and gets home right at 6 p.m. Phylicia wasn't home at this point, and Dina panics. She just kind of started to have a feeling. She had not responded, she being Phylicia, to Dina's text pretty much the whole afternoon since whenever 1:30 or no, excuse me, like 1 o'clock, whenever she had sent the last thing to Dina. So it had been hours that she had not been in contact with Phylicia, and she didn't think much about it at first until she gets home and Felicia's not there. That was very out of the ordinary for Phylicia. So, again, like I said, she was not big city savvy. She wasn't familiar with Baltimore at all. She's only 16, guys, and this is before Ubers. She was not going to be likely to hop in a cab with a stranger. So I think teens are a bit more savvy these days, and with phones and apps and GPSs and Ubers, they're probably going to be a little more adventurous in situations like this. But a lot has changed, like I said, in 14 years. So that wouldn't have necessarily been the case then. So Dina calls Michael at 6:11 p.m., but he did not answer the phone. So finally, almost an hour later at 7 p.m., he returns her call and says that he had last seen Phylicia sleeping at 1:30. Now, earlier he said that she was sleeping at 1:30, but that she said she was going to get up and go get something to eat. So he tells Dina he last sees her sleeping at 1:30. So at 7:30 p.m., about an hour and a half after Dina got home, which I think is a very reasonable timeline, Dina reports Phylicia missing to the police. So she's made some phone calls. She's called her sister. She's called Michael. She's looked around. She's kind of waited. She's texted her sister some more. And she finally calls the police to say that she cannot find her sister. So initially, of course, no foul play is considered. When she was missing, she was wearing slippers. She didn't take any money with her. So her phone was either off or broken. No signals were going to it. And so for all purposes, had her wallet and her phone with her, but her cards and some cash were left back at the apartment. But her wallet and phone were not at the apartment as the investigation ensues.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have any is there anything initially that you?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously something you would want to note. I mean, usually you don't separate the two. I mean, if you do, there's an explanation. Hey, I let somebody borrow my card. Or I pulled cash out or whatever, but usually there's an explanation. But if you're traveling somewhere and you're there for a week, I mean, usually...
No. Excuse me. I might not have been clear. Her cards and her cash had been with her, but they were there at the apartment.
Yeah, not with her on her person.
Oh, yeah. I thought you meant that they were back in North Carolina. Yeah, they were at Dina's house. They just weren't with her, correct?
Meaning if you're going to go get something to eat, you need to take those with you.
Of course.
And to pay for a cab and do all the other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say it comes into question the way, we run into this, I feel like often. It does come into question from some people whether or not it was handled correctly, meaning at the very, very beginning. Pretty soon after, it was one of the larger search parties and searches in that area until that time. So it absolutely was fully investigated eventually. I think that the first few hours are what some people have a problem with. And this can go either way. We talk about this a lot. That's very subjective. We don't know exactly the work that was done, the boots on the ground in those first few moments, those first few hours, except for it was written off as runaway pretty right off the rip. Okay. And this is when family was saying things like she wouldn't run away. Like, she was here visiting family. She was about to graduate high school, so she wanted to be away from her mom. She was about to graduate high school and leave. She had no reason to go visit her family and then run away from there in this new city. I mean, none of these things really made a lot of sense. But they told police that either way, it was looked at as a runaway case right off the rip. So, but eventually the search starts to grow. And the FBI does eventually become involved. But like I said, that it was initially listed as a runaway case. Her father, Russell, eventually, and we're going to come right back to where we were, but in April of 2012, was able to pass a bill called the Phyllis Law. And the the Phylicia law. And the Phylicia law basically just ups the age from 14 to 17 to consider a child critically missing.
Okay.
So that hopefully, potentially, they're not just discounted or looked at as a runaway right off the rip if they're older than 14.
Gotcha.
So that's something that did eventually happen from this case in 2012. All right, so back to it. The search starts to grow, like I said, and the FBI does become involved. So helicopters overhead start searching. They use heat-seeking technology. Now some time has gone on, and they've started to believe now probably some foul play has taken place. At this point, we're looking at, some days. Days have gone by, and it's starting to not look right the more they talk to people. Now, some people have problem with the fact that Russell, her father, initially pretty much just like swarmed to the apartment there with his own little flip book of notepaper and started taking everybody's names down that was there. We come to find out, and this is what we're going to get into in a moment, that quite a few people have been in and out of this apartment leading up to the time that she goes missing. And so he starts to take names of everyone. He tells everyone they're a suspect. So that's kind of how this is going on from the dad's side family end when this is all going down. So eventually, police do go on and start searching nearby Lincoln Park. So Lincoln Park, if you ever listen to the Serial podcast about Adnan Syed, if you haven't, I suggest you do. It's fascinating is one word for it. We've had Lincoln Park in other cases. This is an area that is known to have so much bad things, like so many bodies dumped. And you're going to find out actually a little bit more specifically about that here in a moment. But that's an area nearby, and they start to search that area. Okay, so they get to Lincoln Park, to no avail though there. So the father Russell is starting to organize some searches. A friend back home actually told Phylicia's mother, Janice, that one of Phylicia's little girlfriends back home tells her mom that when she goes to Baltimore, she sometimes was allowed to drink vodka and smoke marijuana with her sister Dina. So Phyllis, by all accounts, is just livid. This is not what she expected to take place when her daughter was there. She was livid at the irresponsibility of Dina in being in her 20s and allowing her 16-year-old sister to partake in these things. So she gets extremely upset. Janice goes on and gets to Baltimore, I believe, on December 30th. So I believe 2 days after we believe her to be missing, Mom gets into the area of Baltimore. She actually confronts Dina with this information. And Dina said that it had occasionally happened that she would allow Phylicia to partake in these things. At some point later, I think Dina denied that she had ever said that. But she did tell Mom that, I've let her do some of that stuff. So now we've got it's like all the roaches are starting to come out from under the bed because little by little, more information is being known about what is actually going on in that apartment, and how it's nothing like what her mom expected when Dina left home to go hang out at Dina, or when Phylicia left home to go hang out at Dina's. So if you remember MySpace, we had some pictures come forward. If you don't know what that is, you guys, it was just like kind of one of the more original social media outlets. So it was pre-Facebook. So on MySpace, some pictures came forward of some parties that went on in Dina's apartment. We have pictures of multiple guys. There are girls. There's definitely alcohol involved. Sometimes it might be a young adult with a child that comes with them, and paraphernalia on the table, these kinds of things. So there have definitely been some parties, which in all accounts, Dina and Michael have every right to do that if they want to. They are in their mid-20s, but they have Michael's little brother who was a teenager and Dina's little sister who was a teenager staying there and also at these parties, hanging out with these same folks. And now we learn not only just prisoners of circumstance, right? Or, it's more that they've been kind of allowed and kind of given these things to partake in. So On Saturday, so at this point, months start to go by. It's looking worse and worse and worse. There were some accounts of people saying they saw someone that matched Phylicia's description walking down this particular road, a highway not far from the apartment. Eventually, that kind of doesn't really match up with like the shoes she was wearing or different things like that. Okay. And that again kind of goes back to when we talked about how they said that she was not a city savvy girl. Like they didn't believe her to be a runaway, and they also didn't think that she would be brazen enough to just set out on foot and explore Baltimore of all things.
Okay.
So, weeks turned to months, and now it's into April. So she went missing at the end of December, and now it's April of 2011. Okay, so it's almost 4 months after she went missing. Police cordon off parts of, I want to make sure I say that correctly. It's a certain part, and it is Patapsco. I'm still probably not saying it right. Patapsco Valley State Park. And so they go on to a new search there. So over 200 officers searched. And at 12:30, a volunteer stumbled upon a partially decomposed body. But upon further testing, they realized it's actually a white male. So this is not Phylicia, and they pretty much initially, they don't know, but they're not assuming this is in any kind of connection to Phylicia's disappearance. So they start again the next day. Over 500 people are searching. They've got canines. They've got all kinds of things going. Now, keep in mind, before this particular search took place, they did enlist the use of cadaver dogs back at the apartment initially. Okay. And so, and we can talk about that more later. We've talked on canines before and cadaver dogs. And cadaver dogs, it's not a precise science. We know that certain things can throw them. We know that certain handlers can make all the difference in the training of the dog and the outcome of some of these things. But it's something to be used. I would consider it something to be used, obviously. Yeah. But and I guess per the reports, these cadaver dogs were used at the apartment complex and in the parking lot, right where, like, let's say Michael would always park his car in this one spot. The cadaver dogs picked up her scent until basically like his car, like where his car would be parked. Okay. And in that spot, they stopped. They like they had a trail until then. There's another time where they're searching out by a dam not far from where they're going to be now. And this search that we're talking about, and the cadaver dogs at that point kind of butt up and kind of hit on something around this dam. But they found nothing from it. So just keep those things in mind. But on this particular search day on April 10th, like I said, we got over 500 people. That's when they're starting to get these scents. So now we're up to April 20th. They're still kind of in this area. And about you guys, my pronunciation of this stuff, the Susquehanna River. At the Susquehanna River, we've got boats kind of backed up against there's a dam there. Okay. And the boats found 2 other bodies about 3 to 4 miles apart in the water. So we're looking at, over the course of a few days, we've got 3 different dead bodies found. So we have Teresa in the chats that said she was talking about Lincoln Park specifically, but like that area is cursed. And this sounds terrible. So remember, the first body we found was that of a white male. We don't know much else about it other than it's never been connected to Phylicia in any kind of way. Here they find 2 other bodies. Both were without clothing. Autopsies were performed on both. The first body was actually determined to be a black male, approximately 6'4", around 240. It took a while, but he was eventually ID'd as 53-year-old Daryl Harper. So Daryl had been missing for days. His wife had actually reported him missing. He had left home. We find out that in the time between him missing and his body being found, he had checked himself into a psychiatric facility with concerns for self-harm, and was able to check himself out eventually. And no official cause of death that we know of has been given out. Maybe it was. Either way, the assumption would be that he committed suicide. So he also is not looked at in connection with Phylicia's disappearance whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've talked about this before. When somebody goes
Mm-hmm.
missing and they're an adult, and you go looking for them, and you realize maybe they've done something like this, right? And I don't mean suicide, but I mean like check themselves in somewhere that they don't want their family to know, right?
Yeah. So when people file those missing person reports, and I was taking some notes earlier,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things that either people either have medical conditions they don't want their family to know about, especially if they have any kind of psychiatric reactions or
Okay.
anything like that. Or sometimes people, not in this case, but I'm saying in other cases, committed crimes, they have warrants, and they don't want family members to know that. So they are not where they're supposed to be. So then reports are filed. So sometimes agencies that are working missing persons are going to look for a caseload of 200 or 300 people over the year, and really only maybe 5 to 6 people are actually missing. Legitimately missing, yes. And those are very, I guess you would say, very specific cases. In this situation, it looks like you've got some people who have passed away that are now being located as missing persons out in Lincoln Park area. And so now you're also, depending on the agency, you're draining resources when you're trying to find, in this case, I'm going to keep talking and y'all just let me know if you can hear me. Trying to use a different mic here. Sorry about that. I just unmuted mine, but nobody,
Can I hear you?
I don't know. Nobody's responded. Y'all let me know if you can hear me. Okay. So bear with us. We'll pop back up. What's that?
No.
Yeah. So what I was discussing was actually with when you're looking for missing persons and they don't want to be found. I'm not saying this case. What I was saying before we lost sound is that people can have either medical conditions, psychiatric conditions, things that they don't want their family to know about, and they'll check themselves into a facility. You also have people that go out there and have committed crimes and don't want their families to know about it, or they're having extramarital affair, whatever. They want to hide that, so then they're not where maybe a family expects them to be. I'm not saying the case that we're covering. I'm saying now that other decedents are being located, you as an agency now have to figure out who these unknown decedents are, and now that slows down your resources working your case as well. Most departments are not large enough to handle 2 or 3 scenes like that and not feel it, feel your resources being depleted. So that may explain some of the case in itself if the case feels like it had slowed down at that time for family members or people who were following the case. It's probably also eye-opening for other people to go, whoa, you're looking for one missing person and now you're recovering 3 different decedents or 3 different bodies now that apparently may not even be related to this case at all. And it sounds like this Lincoln Park area had that history of that ongoing problem. So also for those people that love to pull numbers and crunch numbers and look at missing person cases, or maybe you read a news story that says, thousands of people are missing every year and that sort of thing. Numbers can be skewed because people are reported missing, then they're located, and sometimes agencies don't change the criteria for the missing person. So even an agency may report they have 100 missing persons in a year, and technically they've located every person, but maybe 25 of those people, they forgot to go back into their report writing database and click them as not missing anymore. It's kind of some statistic nerd stuff to talk about, but keep that in mind when you're looking at things like this. Probably not even related to this case, but.
Mute your mic.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're back at it. So, yes, just as, oh my stars. Just as we were saying, 3 bodies were found in the search for Phylicia Barnes. So the last one we found was the male that was presumably a victim of his own demise there. But the second body that was found that same day, about 3 miles away from that initial male, was ID'd by a rose tattoo and by dental records, sadly, and it was the body of Phylicia Barnes. All right. So they found her, like I said, on April 20th of 2011, about 4 months after she went missing, almost to the day. And that was in the Susquehanna River. So her body was actually floating down that river at that time. So the next year, on April 25th of 2012, Michael Johnson was charged and arrested in the murder of Phylicia Barnes. But you guys, the roller coaster is just beginning. There were reports from a neighbor that Michael had been seen sweating and pulling a tote. So they say tote, it's interchanged with tote, bin, container, you name it. Picture if you go to Walmart or Target and you grab one of those plastic tubs that has the lids that click on the top. You may put your Christmas belongings in there or store old clothes in there, whatever. And they come in varying sizes. Okay. So a neighbor says that he saw Michael, like I said, sweating, not wearing a shirt, pulling this tote up the stairs out of the apartment. Okay. So they say that it's the 35-gallon bin. That would be like the chicken one.
Okay.
The one of the really, really big ones.
Yeah.
This bin has never been recovered, but Michael had made conflicting statements about that day in question. So first, he said that he had used that tub to move clothing as he was about to move out of Dina's apartment. He then changes his story and says that he actually had used that bin to move some of his weight equipment. Well, we have receipt of and surveillance of Michael buying that bin at a local Walmart that day. So it's not a question whether or not he had it. So it's for whatever purpose you think he had the bin. He said he had it. We have surveillance of him buying it that day. It just depends on what you think might have been in it. And even he seems to be confused by that because he did change his story a couple of times. We know that investigators in their search and upon their indictment of Michael Johnson in 2012, that next year, they found over 500 phone calls and texts between Phylicia and Michael on his phone. Okay. I don't have any record of what they found on like phone records from Phylicia, but they found this on Michael's phone. On June 12th of 2012, Michael pled not guilty. All right. So he goes to his first trial where I just told you he pled not guilty. So we're going to talk about that. That first trial, excuse me. On that first trial, we have Dr. Pamela Southall. Now that's who conducted the autopsy on Phylicia. She did testify that the cause of death was asphyxiation. So this could mean a few things: suffocation, smothering, strangling, manual or otherwise. She even said that in this case that some other forms of oxygen deprivation could cause her to come to these findings of asphyxiation, to include potential drowning. Now, that's where it gets a little in the weeds, because there are some discounting ideas about whether or not there was water in her lungs. Not to nerd out on the medical portion of this, but most of you know I am a nurse, and so I kind of like to do that. But there wouldn't be, if Phylicia died before she was put in that body of water, there would not be water in her lungs because she wouldn't have inhaled water, right? So if she's in a semi-conscious state and potentially still somewhat alive when she's put in the body of water and she takes a breath, she will inhale water, and it would be in her lungs. I think ultimately, though, we see a lot of different testimony from a lot of different MEs and coroners or state examiners or whoever's conducting these autopsies, depending on the jurisdiction. I think that my layman's opinion here would be that this particular doctor was keeping a very broad stroke in this. I think she just kind of wanted to go with the broad form of asphyxiation. Mm-hmm. I do think that she was kind of peppered into a corner saying, could that include, to include also drowning? I feel like that's kind of clear cut, though, because there's either water in the alveoli or there's not.
I think you also have to be able to explain that. So, because to a jury, you got to remember, I mean, not you, but I mean, the listeners, jurors hear things, and you have what we call the CSI effect, where things are covered on a TV show, and then jurors believe that. And so you have to kind of overcome that. You'd also have to be able to explain, is this truth or is this a fallacy that if someone dies and they're in water for up to 4 months and gases are escaping their body, would water still be able to get into their lungs? So, and if that's the case, they may not have drowned, but could water get into their lungs in that situation?
In some other capacity?
Yes, in some other way.
Not because they breathed it in.
Yes.
Perfect. So, and that's just some ins and outs of the idea of a jury trial, and you know, in a murder case where things aren't necessarily so cut and dry and aren't necessarily so clear. That's the weeds you get into. So the jury also saw a video that showed Dina, Phylicia, Michael, and Michael's little brother, and some others streaking and engaging in what they call naked touching. So this was not a video of actual intercourse, but they are naked. Please keep in mind the age differences here. Michael was, I believe at this time, 26 years old, and Phylicia was 16. Not to mention his teenage brother. Yeah. And so we have some video of, like, we got Dina and Michael kind of touching each other and kissing, and maybe a little touching between Phylicia and the little brother. And then there comes a point where you see Michael kind of like it's all in the guise of just playful touch and banter. They had been drinking, and you see Michael reach out and attempt to touch Phylicia, questionably on her vagina. It's not exactly, it's in that area, and she kind of laughs but pushes his hand away. So she's physically rejecting him when he does this. I talked about this the first time I covered this case. Rejection is rejection. So when people laugh and giggle and still reject you, it's still a rejection. Meaning she's having a good time. And think about it. She's got an older sister. She could potentially have, and there were questions that she did have some sort of a schoolgirl crush on this guy. The sister's boyfriend, you know, if she thinks he's cute and funny, but she's not trying to do all that. Right. She also doesn't want to feel embarrassed, probably, or younger than she is, because she is so young already, and all these things. So her pushing him away but laughing doesn't, to me, make it sound like she was necessarily engaged in an affair with this guy. She's saying no, you know. But when he reached out and tried to touch Phylicia, you can see in the video that, or excuse me, when he's actually touching Dina and kissing Dina, he's looking at Phylicia. He's not looking at his girlfriend when he's touching her. He's looking at her sister. So the prosecution presented evidence that Michael and Phylicia had exchanged at this point about 1,300 text messages between June and December of 2010 when she returned for this visit. So in those few months, they had exchanged 1,300 text messages. That's a lot.
I was trying to do the math again. What is that, like 100?
That's 5 months.
Okay. About 200 a month?
I mean, yeah, over, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
quite a bit.
Considerable communication. So we have in this first trial a witness, what we're calling a witness, named James McCrae. So they considered him the most critical witness to the prosecution's case. He had been incarcerated on several different charges, mainly petty theft. So he came forward only after media kind of reported on Michael's arrest. And he testified that Michael had called him for help in disposing of Phylicia's body. He did tell the jury that Michael said he had sexually assaulted her, and when she would not stop crying, he strangled her. This guy says that he says, quote, "I was close and he needed assistance real quick. He had an ex-girlfriend at the home, so he had to make the moves real quick." All right. So he said he told Michael to turn off his cell phone to make sure his whereabouts wouldn't be tracked. He told him to dump the body into water so that DNA evidence would be destroyed. So then he says some things that the defense is able to poke holes in. So he also says that he thinks that she died like 3 days before Christmas when she was there up until December 28th. Like we have, her sister seeing her and we have text messages and whatnot. So he starts to say things that don't make a lot of sense. And then we realize he came forward in a couple of other cases to try to be an expert witness. But this is the guy that the prosecution was kind of hinging on because really all they had was circumstantial. They've got nothing physically linking, nothing that we can find that can really link Michael to her in the sense of her murder. So they're hanging on this witness statement. So anyway, all accounts are that James is unreliable. He's an unreliable witness. It got a little sketchy though, because he did seem to have some details that the public didn't know. Okay. So he knew things like that Michael called Phylicia little sis, and it just other things that weren't necessarily made aware to the public. But so he's called, he's their big old witness. And so since he was so, questionable there and deemed unreliable, Michael was acquitted at that first charge. He was acquitted of first-degree charge, but he was convicted on second-degree murder. Okay, so the first trial, there's a reason I'm saying the first trial, he was convicted of second-degree murder. They had tried to get him for first. Things got a little questionable. They got him for second degree. Okay. So later, the defense stated that the prosecution had tried to bolster the witness's credibility, even though they knew that he was unreliable, like during their closing statements. So the circuit court granted motion for a new trial on the terms of a Brady violation. Now, we've talked about a Brady violation before. The definition of that, just in straight terms, is when the prosecution doesn't turn over information that would be helpful to the defense, or if the person can't be charged and they can with this and they continue to pursue these same charges. So the circuit court's using this Brady violation as a reason for acquittal, or for a mistrial. So they grant a motion for a new trial, and we're going to move right into jury or to trial number 2. Okay. So new trial date was set. They're trying to avoid double jeopardy, so they're kind of walking on eggshells here and being a little careful. So the second trial, the prosecutors twice played portions of recordings from wiretaps that weren't supposed to be played. Now, the wiretaps themselves were obtained legally by authorities. They obtained what they needed there, all their paperwork, their T's were crossed and their I's were dotted. However, the judge had requested that portions of it be redacted before it was handed over to the jury, and those portions were not redacted. So the prosecution played. I'm going to see if I can cue it up. You guys let me know if you have any trouble hearing it, because we're going to go old school in the audio again today. Might as well keep consistent. We've already done that. So let you hear a phone call between Michael and I believe his cousin, and this was on a wiretap here.
My thing is, what are they testing against? If they taking my DNA, what are you testing against? DNA is found on her where. And the fucking part about it is, I can't sit there and tell you that it wouldn't be there. Be where? Underneath the fingernails and all that shit. Because of the situation that was going on. Because me, her, and Dana was play fighting and shit. And I don't know who it was, but somebody scratched the fuck out of me. And we was all sitting there playing. They pretty much whipped my ass. But it wasn't on no real shit, nothing like that. But somebody scratched. You know how you play fight and shit like that. Oh, when was it? It was not too long before all that shit happened. Everybody was like, well, wouldn't that be washed away? Saying as though she probably took a shower. I'm like, well, if that's the case, wouldn't it be washed away if you sat in the water? So evidently, they must have got a DNA sample off of her. You were there. It was up to skin tag. They like that fucking too. I still don't know what they're trying for. Alright, tripping, yo. It is what it is, nigga. I mean, it is what it is. That's a lot. However you look at it, it's a long time. Yeah, well, I ain't complaining. It's life. Some niggas get dealt the motherfucking speeds. Some niggas get dealt the clubs, nigga. I can't say I had a fuck up one. I had a pretty good one. So far, I did a lot of shit that I wanted to do. There's only one more thing that I want to do. What? Brazil, nigga. But the one thing I would tell you niggas to do, take a cruise. It ain't over yet, nigga. Yeah, not yet. So it still wouldn't be over. It's gonna be a motherfucking fight. I ain't going out without fighting, nigga. That's right. You shouldn't.
Okay. So did you guys hear that loud and clear? That was Michael Johnson's recorded conversation with his cousin. And he begins the conversation talking about DNA. And he's sounding a little fearful.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little concerned that they're going to find his DNA. And he specifically says, like under her fingernails and stuff. That wouldn't normally be the case, guys. Like, unless she's scratching his back because he's got an itch. At every turn, though, this looks at like inappropriate behavior because she's 16. He's 26 years old. So he says, we were play fighting. And then to me, it sounds like, every time I've heard this, it sounds like he's coming up with this story as he's saying it. He starts to talk a little louder. He starts to like get into some details. Like he says, we were play fighting. You know how you play fight. Okay, no, I don't play fight with a teenage boy like that. Like that's not going to happen without clothes on and play fight. So he says, how you play fight. He said, well, I don't know who did it, but somebody scratched me. Actually, he said somebody scratched the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So, good night, Teresa. So before we talk about the second half of that phone call that we listened to on the portion that he was talking about fingernails and DNA, what is you've heard, for those that don't know, BC is a retired homicide lieutenant. So you've heard plenty of recorded phone calls and.
Yeah. So like you're saying, it does sound like, and that's pure speculation that he's creating an explanation for why DNA would be under her fingernails, but something that is believable. It sounded like, and I could be wrong, it sounded like he was saying basically like, I'm gonna lay down for a while, like this one, like I'm done, this is the end of my life kind of thing. But then it kind of switches gear and says but I'm not gonna go out without a fight kind of thing.
Sure. Well, so with that, what he does say is he's like, to me, it's always sounded like he's reconciling it with himself. Kind of like whatever path happens. Like if he gets convicted, he says, I've lived a good life, man. I mean, I guess I've had a good life. You don't say that at 26. If you didn't do this,
right.
It would be different if he was saying, man, they're going to get me on this. I just know they are. They know I've been in trouble for XYZ before. They're not going to like the fact that I was hanging out with this girl and I shouldn't have had pictures of me and her, like, but it doesn't mean I killed her. Like, you would be saying all those things.
Yeah.
Not, I've had a good life. Like, they may just convict me of this, you know. But then he turns around and says, but I'm not going down without a fight. And he starts talking about, I'm going to get out of here. And the guy says, where? And he said, Brazil. I don't know, Brazil. We find out later that Michael was under the impression that there was no like extradition treaty with the United States and Brazil. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he's wrong, actually.
Yeah, I think that is actually wrong.
So sorry about that. So that was one of the portions of the recorded phone call. And because of that, like I said, the prosecution just wanted a case so bad. And because of that, they didn't redact what they were supposed to redact. And that was enough to get trial number 2 ruled a mistrial.
Okay.
So trial number 2 gets thrown out now. So now we've had 2 trials, both resulting in a mistrial. So they're going to turn around and roll right into trial number 3. A little bit of time goes by before this is able to take place. But guess what? We get the same judge presiding over the third trial. And so finally on March 2018, or in March of 2018, the third trial starts. And that judge, the same one we've had since the second trial, determines that there's just not enough to convict Michael with. And the trial is actually thrown out. And this time, instead of declared a mistrial, he was just fully acquitted. So what that means, if you aren't aware or don't know, is that he can't be tried again now. So Michael can no longer be tried for the murder of Phylicia Barnes. The first 2 kind of don't count. Like we said, it wouldn't be double jeopardy because they were deemed a mistrial. But this third time, it was acquitted upon just the basis of not having the evidence that the judge felt necessary to place a conviction. We do have, in January of 2011, this is from the People's Champion blog. It's an interesting site, actually. I would urge you to take a look at it. In January of 2011, there was a text from a woman. The details I'm going to tell you here are all the details that can be found about this. There was a text from a woman who was friends with one of Michael's brothers and tweeted or texted, quote, "It's trapped at the dam. Don't pull the lever." When she was questioned about this text or tweet or whatever, I've read text and I've read tweets. So I think it's text. When she was questioned about this, she at first acts as though she doesn't know what they're talking about. She doesn't recall ever typing that. And then she admits to remembering having typed it, but doesn't know what it has to do with. Can't remember what it has to do with, other than to say, when questioned further, that, you know, she doesn't remember, but it did not have anything to do with Phylicia Barnes. She knows that. Okay. So I think where I would be, what I would like to investigate in that point, I guess, would be, do any of his brothers have friends? Is anybody who works at the dam or who can access whatever the lever is at the dam? Yes. Right. And so then I want to read this to you, and then I want you to tell me everything you know.
Okay.
Okay, guys, this is the last little tidbit here. When Michael Johnson's cell phone, of course, they obtained the search to extract the data from his phone and to look through his search history and things like that. He had searches. This is after Phylicia had gone missing, meaning after she had been murdered. We find out later. He had searches for forensic procedures, for books on high-profile cases such as Casey Anthony and JonBenet Ramsey. And if he fancied himself a crime junkie of some sort, then that's fine. Yeah. But they don't say that he has a lot of this history. This only seems to be after she vanishes, okay? Don't look at my search history because I have a true crime podcast, and that could look very questionable.
But your search history would be 12 months worth of that.
18.
Or 18 months worth of that, I'm sorry.
So we also have the internet searches that police said that were found on his phone after his arrest in April of 2012 that appear to have occurred well after the killing. And they show visits to news articles about the case, which that alone wouldn't necessarily be crazy. Twitter updates about the case, a Facebook page about Phylicia. And then he also showed a webpage for forensic testing turnaround time and hair and DNA evidence. So he's either heavily invested in them solving this, and he wants to know the turnaround time on this DNA evidence.
Right.
Or he's figuring out how much time he might have left, I would imagine would be the two choices.
Yes. That could be true.
Mm-hmm. So what's your thoughts on that text about the dam and the lever?
That I don't know, unless, like, if you're looking at that layout and that body of water where she was recovered has a dam.
It did.
And there's an actual lever.
Yeah.
Because some operate with like keys,
electronics,
and then or some are like these giant like key thing you put in and you have to crank it for 20 minutes to get things to open. So I don't.
Well, also, if she doesn't work
right.
at the dam, she could call any of those things a lever. I mean, don't pull the lever, don't raise
right.
it, don't whatever.
Yeah.
So just with that in mind, and that could all be coincidence. With that in mind, we do know that the cadaver dogs touched on the dam.
Okay.
Remember that? They hit on the dam, and then, and then nothing. That kind of fizzled out there. But they did have a hit at the dam. Also, go back to that tub. There's a lot of weirdness in this tub situation because at first, Dina says that she's missing a tub like that from her home. But remember, he bought one at Walmart. We have surveillance photo. There's no discounting that. There had been one in her home, one he bought, and then you realize that the one she goes back to then change and say, oh, wait, no, mine's not missing. Mine wasn't that big. So the two different sizes are what comes into play. Hers is a different size than the one he bought. So it looks like the one he bought might have still been at the house and hers was the one missing, or vice versa. Either way, one of the totes is still missing, has never been recovered.
Okay.
And we do have the neighbor. This is what led to his arrest, saying that he saw him sweating and trying to actively, get this tote down the stairs. Now the cadaver dogs, like I said, hit on the dam. Phylicia's body, when found, like I said, it was about 4 months after she went missing. It was floating down the river. And it had been 4 months. So her body in water for 4 months. We talked on this a little bit earlier. Even I did, about the idea of a decomposition rate, and these kinds of things in water. The medical examiners have said that her body was not nearly as decomposed as they would have thought, given the amount of time, in theory, her body was in that water. Had it been in the water since December. They have no doubt that she was dead in December. They place her murder that far back. But they say that they were surprised that it was not much more decomposed than it was. Now, that's where some people will say, or there's a running theory that it had been because she had been in that tub in the water.
Okay.
And that tub in Baltimore, in a lake, in April, that's going to be cold water. So her in a tub, basically floating in refrigeration at that point, could potentially preserve her body, and slow decomposition in that way.
Yeah, and it will protect her from turtles or other animals and wildlife that helps with decomposition,
and maybe make it such that it wasn't found. I mean, someone could have seen a tub floating down the lake and not thought too much about it. 4 months is a long time to float without your body being picked apart. I mean, not to be gruesome, but by fish and turtles and all the things. So
also with moving water like that, if she was in the tote and she get caught on, say, a tree trunk, some roots, whatever, and stayed stationary for a month, because questions always come up with, when do bodies or decedents sink, and then when do they float and resurface? So if you've got moving water, you got to take that into account, but then also getting caught onto debris, roots, tree branches, whatever. Bodies can stay like that for a longer period of time, obviously, until either enough gas is built up or currents kind of change, or the water speed changes or whatever, and the body becomes dislodged. I also wonder if she was in a tote for that long and rigor sets in, but now, and when she's found, I would assume completely.
So one of the examiners did say that her body did not look as though it had been bent in a way that would have put her in the tote.
Right.
She was not wearing clothing when she was found.
Okay.
Also, we do have, let me see if I saved that, because at one point we have a situation where Michael was texting with his little brother, and you hear, let's see, I might not have saved that, but there is a text where it says it's from his little brother that they call Boots, I believe. And essentially Boots says something along the lines of, like, fuck that, don't tell her twice, whoop that ass.
Okay.
Or don't ask her twice. That's what it was. Don't ask her twice, whoop that ass. But again, it's all circumstantial. So, like, while it all points to, if he's texting his brother and being like, oh man, like, I'm trying to get with this girl or whatever, or, and brother's like, like, don't ask her twice or whatever. All of these things look terrible. And I'd venture to say he's a pretty gross dude. Like, he's doing some bad things with a young girl. This is considered, I think some people got a little confused when they report on this. I've heard some podcasts or read some sources, and they talk about Michael and child porn involving Phylicia. Everything I can find, I believe they're talking about that video I was telling you, which that would be considered child pornography. She was a minor. The age of consent, I believe there's 14, but either way, she can consent. You can't have material of you touching this girl when she's still a minor. She's still under 18 years old. So that would be considered child pornography. And it's clearly on video that they are both without clothes and he is touching her. So, I mean, he was definitely involved in some gross stuff. We say it all the time. Can you be a creep and not be a murderer? Yeah, you can be. But I want to know what was in that tote, and I want to know where that tote went. The one that he had his hands on.
Yes. So, I mean, it makes sense why he was charged and why they went through so many trials. It's kind of like what we talk about, and people get frustrated and mad. You have to go slow on investigations. It's not a rodeo. That's one of the best homicide detectives I worked with. That was his saying, and it made sense. And sometimes, I mean, it's like playing basketball and it's full court press, and you and your team, you have to slow everything down. So no, we don't move at the speed of the news, the speed of the chief, the sheriff, and also, and this is respectfully to the family.
Yeah.
Family members often obviously are upset, they're mad, they want the investigation, or they want to know all the details of the investigation. You can't say that. You can't tell them certain details, but you also have to work it at your speed. I don't know all the ins and outs of this case. I would just say that in the judicial system, there's a reason that you have first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and why sometimes it takes so long to charge someone, and then why trials sometimes can take so long, after someone's charged to actually go to trial, because of the checks and balances, because of discovery, so that the defense has time to go through everything that's handed over, so you don't have a Brady violation. But there's
other complications that happen in this case. Unfortunately, and this has nothing to do with Phylicia, but the lead investigator on the case, when this happened, just, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say days prior, his daughter had gone missing. And he actually winds up getting in huge trouble a little bit later. And I say huge trouble. I mean, he was removed from the case, removed from work for a little while he got investigated, because he got jammed up on some charges of forcefully entering an apartment complex in the vein of looking for his daughter. Okay. So when the first time I heard this, I thought of like under duress. Like, I can't really blame him. You can't do it as a police officer, but as a concerned father, you know, whatever. Yeah. And so he was, I don't know. So he got jammed up on that. But then later you find out that his 15-year-old daughter had said that dad actually beat her or hit her with a cord on her arm and her butt because of something that just happened at home. Like, that was his punishment, was to like whip her with this cord. No. And so she ran off. So she wasn't missing as in kidnapped or something. She ran off. And so he's trying to find her, and his temper clearly got the best of him there. So he was going to actually get more jammed up on that. And finally they just ruled that just go home, but your family has to attend counseling or whatever. That's neither here nor there, but that could play some part in the way this was initially handled. That was all happening at the same time, meaning not him being in trouble, but him looking for his daughter and having that stuff going on at home. Yeah. So, you know,
it's tough. And cities are all different, and their homicide units are different. Clearance rates are different. You've got smaller cities that have an astronomical amount of homicides, and they just don't have the resources sometimes. And I think the Baltimore area for many years, that's what they were suffering, was just such a high homicide rate and just a lack of resources. And I don't think it has anything to do with investigative skills. I just think sometimes places get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think that once hers was deemed a murder, it bumped him up to, I think, 197 murders for the year, which at first wasn't a big deal. I think I've got this statistic correct. But then pretty soon after, they found 2 other dead bodies. One wasn't a murder. But once they bumped up to 200, that put him in a different category at that time. They had not seen a number like that, I think, since like the 70s. So it was really starting to escalate at that point, around the 2010 area.
Yeah. And their population, if I'm not mistaken, Baltimore was under $1 million or under 1 million people. Around that time, same time frame, within the last 10 to 15 years. Okay. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, their population had dropped a little, and they were under 1 million people. So just per capita, that's a lot of murder.
You know, and it's just so unfortunate. I hate it. I hate it for the family. Michael will not be charged again, like we said. He cannot be charged in her murder. But I don't think, you know, this is one where I didn't even label it unsolved, in the sense that, you know, we've had some that are like, there's no conviction, but I don't think that any investigators are pursuing any different leads. I think that they're, you know, they're pretty sure they got their guy, and they just don't have what's going to be needed to convict him. I mean, that's really kind of all there is to it. It's not like they're like, well, let's look into this idea or turn over that lead. I'm sure if new information came up, of course, but as it stands, I think they've got their guy, but they had to narrow down quite a list, because like I said, there had been multiple people in and out of that apartment that, you know, the few days that she was there and the parties that took place and things like that. So they definitely had their work cut out for them.
And if I could also say, just for people who are listening that actually work in law enforcement or are in support roles for law enforcement, whenever someone's reported as missing and the family is basically screaming or saying, hey, this is out of character, this person would never run away, or they would never, you know, that they should be home, or they should be at work. You know, we've said it before on the show, like, listen to the family. If I could say that in all capital letters with exclamation marks, just listen to what the family's telling you as a patrol officer, as a detective, and do it. I mean,
well, and that's what they said here. You know, keep in mind she had skipped 3rd grade. She was about to graduate a year early. She had plans to go to college and study psychology. Like, she had zero reason that anyone knows of to want to leave. And she had never attempted being a runaway before. She was there visiting. probably feeling like a big girl. You know, she's 16, but she's hanging out with her 20-something-year-old sister.
Yeah.
She probably feels like she's getting a little independence.
Mm-hmm.
Probably found herself in situations she wasn't particularly comfortable with, you know, but having a good time nonetheless. She loved her sister, and you know, so it's really unfortunate. I think if I'm not mistaken, her mother in 2011 moved from Monroe, North Carolina to the Atlanta area to be closer to family and things like that. But that's the case of Phylicia Barnes. So, well, we can start to wrap it up. It's getting late. You said that you taught a gang class this morning. You've got some other classes. We've talked about it a couple of times. Some more digital classes. If you follow BC Sanders on Instagram or the Disruptors podcast with BC and Ski, he's a co-host there too. They always put in their stories when he's got new classes lined up, dates and times and things like that. And they're starting to get the word out.
The word got out, and the classes are getting full a lot faster. And there's only but so many seats I can have on a virtual. So if anybody's interested, just email us at thedisruptors.bc.ski, that's SKI @gmail. And that's how most of the people are reaching us. It's the easiest way to do it. I'll also be teaching some in-person classes in North Carolina, and that'll be the end of March. So some people will actually take the course, and that's a 2-day course, and working on doing some things that I think some people will enjoy. And that class are a little different than other gang classes. It's not going to be too boring.
Yeah,
going to get really in depth, and I've also brought in sources before to help teach. So, but yeah, people can reach us at Gmail or Instagram.
Okay, you can follow them under the same name. So BC Sanders or the Disruptors podcast with BC and Ski on Instagram. Their YouTube channel, they have a YouTube channel with their podcast of the same name. Carly is in the chats and said, what if you're already signed up? Carly has already taken a class, and I think are you signed up for a second one, Carly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this one that she's got is going to be Chicago gangs. So it's going to be Gangster Disciples, Satan Disciples, Vice Lords, Latin Kings. Yep. You got it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to start teaching these classes pretty soon.
There'll be a few like that. So, she was in one of the other classes, and she said supposed to be. But yeah, the classes are open to citizens as well. I guess I should have said that. So you don't have to be in law enforcement. You can take the courses. This is knowledge that I think everybody should know if they want to know.
We've talked about it because, I mean, even like if you work in schools, if you're in school administration, this applies. I know the more you and I have talked about it, it's opened my eyes to gangs in a different kind of way. So it applies on a much more of a broad stroke than I had initially considered. So either way, it's a good one. He's talked about doing some homicide classes and things like that. So yeah, follow him on that. Look up some merch. He's got some baseball tees for sale right now on Minor League Studios. That's our buddy Bill, who puts out some good merch. So if you go to minorleaguestudios.com, you can see some Disruptors baseball tees. But I'm not really doing anything. I just kind of sit around and eat bonbons all day and every now and then do a podcast.
No, that's not even close to being true.
But yeah, so we are continuing on. I need to talk to Beth because I believe my buddy Beth from Beth and Greg, the bar's open. Well, the bar's open with Beth and Greg. I've been talking like Yoda lately. I need to talk to her. I think we're going to do a ladies' night pretty soon. Ladies' night podcast. And Davey's been requesting some international cases. So I told him I'd be trying to work on that. We could revisit the Somerton man. Do you guys remember that?
I don't remember that, do I?
Oh, it's an old case from Australia, and he... potentially it could have been like a weird CIA,
he was the missing
double agent. He had
I do remember that
rolled up piece of paper in his pocket, and
he had some clothes. His clothes labels,
he
or
did.
The way they were sewn.
The way some things were sewn in. It was an interesting case.
Yes,
I like that. Do some more studying on that one.
So, are you going to entertain maybe Josh Hood coming on as a guest?
Yeah, for sure.
We'll pick a case and he'll have to research it. How about that? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't mind. So I don't mind to do a case that he's familiar with either. We can talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, you guys, we appreciate you and thank you for coming back slowly but steadily. Season 2 is starting to grow, so make sure you hit that little subscribe button. It's free. Tell your friends. Also, the annoying part of the podcast, but if you listen any of the podcasts you listen to, if you hit download, like if you go to Spotify or you go to iTunes and you hit the download button, it'll automatically like keep those numbers up every time. And then if you, of course, on Spotify, you can only hit the stars. You can't review anything. On iTunes, you can write words. Those are fun. Words are fun, guys. And then to subscribe on YouTube, it's free. So y'all do all the stuff. And I hope y'all have a fantastic week. In my brain, if we can get through February, it's easy cooking after that, because then we're into March and summertime's going to be around the corner. So that's where my brain's at all of February. We got a leap year this year too.
Yeah.
Why is that funny?
I don't know. I always thought leap year was fake, but I guess it's real.
We had one 4 years ago. So
it's a real thing.
Hey, Marines Blood. We got Brittany Faulkner, Carly. Again, I know there's more of you guys in the chats. I don't want to risk scrolling up on my computer right now and touching anything.
Can I also say real quick on the chats? I'm sorry, but I can't keep up with them, and I try my best.
With the chats?
Yeah, I try to reply or at least acknowledge. I think there was a question earlier about water temperature and decomp and stuff, but if I missed something, I apologize.
I think that was Michael Hendricks. I saw that. But I think you responded to that one.
Yeah,
okay.
I did, and I tried again. What I was trying to say earlier with comment to Davey, and I was saying I will repost the white pride street gangs, but it was censoring and it wouldn't let it post for some reason. I don't know.
And if you are, and even if you're not, because it was a really cool interview, but if you are familiar with Murphy's Law punk band, BC just dropped that one yesterday or today.
Yes.
He interviewed Ben and Amy from Murphy's Law, and so we got the chance to meet them a few weeks ago at a show they did down this way, and then he was super kind and excited to hop on the Disruptors podcast, so he did, and so BC interviewed those two, and they're just a really fun couple who are I believe in their like early 50s now, but they've been married since 19 I don't know, they've been together since the 80s.
Like 86.
Yeah.
Their first date was like a Ramon show.
Yeah.
Just so happy.
Just a fun, happy couple, a lot of fun. And they talk about skateboarding and punk music and all kinds of things. So that's a fun, y'all need to listen to that if you haven't. But yeah, keep following along. What are you laughing at?
This sweet.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think I'm supposed to do that, right? It's required.
Yeah.
And so Davey is saying social media is extreme anti-white gangs across the board. You got to be sort of discreet about posting those classes. I think that he's going to be talking about the way you word it sometimes.
Okay.
May get taken down or censored or those kinds of things.
All right. Good note.
But yeah, we love you guys, and we really do appreciate your support and everything you do. So I hope you guys have a super awesome week. And I guess until then, we will see y'all next Tuesday. And we're going to sit here for like 20 minutes while this button catches up. It's like for real. Y'all speak amongst yourselves. Hey,
Marine Blood, just email me in reference